Okay, welcome everybody to our first webinar of 2021. Pretty exciting. How to eat mindfully. My name is Christopher Shulgan. I'm part of the team that creates content here at Medcan. A couple of administrative details to deal with before we shift into the actual content of the presentation. We'll be taking questions at the end. Leslie Beck will speak for approximately 20 minutes, and then there'll be about 10 minutes or so for questions at the end. So how to ask questions. You can ask through the chat function. You can also ask through the Q&A function. Today's webinar, and Leslie, you can come in, you can start your video, and you can unmute yourself. Today's webinar is How to Eat Mindfully with Leslie Beck. It's a beginner's guide to mindful eating. So what is mindful eating? So much of our eating today happens when we're distracted. So it happens, maybe you're scrolling through a social media feed on your phone. Maybe you're trying to get some work done and gobbling lunch. Maybe you're watching a screen, but the point is you're distracted. Mindful eating is the opposite of that. So it takes techniques from Buddhism, it takes techniques from meditation, and it applies it to eating in order to develop a healthier relationship with food. Leslie Beck is going to be walking us through today's presentation. Leslie is the Director of Food and Nutrition here at Medcan. Leslie, how are you today?
I'm great, thanks. How are you?
I'm great. It's fantastic that you're doing this today. I think this is right around, it's a perfect time. It's right around the new year. Everybody's thinking about how to improve their lifestyle. And thank you for doing it. So why don't we just shift into your presentation, because I know we have a lot of content to get through.
Well, thank you for the introduction, Chris, and hello, everyone. Thank you very much for spending your lunch hour with me to learn about mindful eating. I'm not sure if some of you are actually eating your lunch right now. You won't be able to eat mindfully if you're also paying attention to me, but that's perfectly fine. First of all, full disclosure, I am by no means an expert on the topic of mindful eating. I am not a trained practitioner in mindful eating. That said, I certainly have learned quite a bit about the practice and have incorporated some of it into my own life. And certainly based on the research that supports it, I really do believe that mindful eating, it doesn't matter. Mindful eating can be part of anyone's healthy eating initiatives, and it really should be. So let's get started. Here's what we're going to discuss today over the next 20 minutes. And I really am calling this a beginner's guide to mindful eating. So I want to talk first of all about what is mindlessly eating, the opposite of mindful eating. We're going to go into then a little bit of a definition about mindfulness, then mindful eating, and why you should become a mindful eater. What are the benefits? What could it do for you? I'll take you through a few mindful eating exercises and then go into sort of 8 steps to eating mindfully and recap the principles. I'm going to share with you some resources that you might find helpful. And then as Chris said at the end, we'll take questions. So before we begin, I want to do a little poll, and I think Chris has that poll he's going to bring up. I just want to find out a little bit about you. So just take a second to fill out which one best represents you. So, you might have heard a little bit about mindful eating, but you don't know what it is. Or you do know, well, actually, pardon me. First one is you haven't heard about it at all. Second part is, second answer, pardon me. It's been a busy morning. I know a little bit about mindful eating and you'd like to start practicing it more often. Or perhaps you regularly do practice mindful eating and just thought this webinar could provide a bit of a refresher for you. Or perhaps you've never heard about it and you're just curious to learn. It says host and panelists can't vote, Chris, so hopefully that's not true. That's just me and you. Okay. So I'll let Chris show the answers. It's just, I like to find out a little bit about where people are coming from. Which normally I would do if we were in person. Okay, so you know a little bit, that's great. Fantastic, okay. So let's begin then. For next slide, Chris, thank you. So I want to start with just a little bit of an exercise. I want you all to think about the last meal you ate yesterday. And I want you to consider the answers to some questions. So I want you to think about the last meal. Why did you eat that meal? Were you hungry? Was it because it was the time that you were supposed to eat, because the food was served to you, so it was there, or because you were bored or stressed. Think about that a little bit. Then think about, what actually did you eat for your last meal? What foods made up the meal? Did you appreciate how the food looked on your plate? How did the foods taste? Did you notice subtle flavors in the food, certain spices perhaps that you used? Did you taste every bite of the food you ate? How did you eat that meal? Were you rushed and barely tasting anything? Were you distracted, reading a magazine, checking your emails, so on and so forth? Or were you eating mindfully? Were you eating by yourself, with your family, with your roommates? And then think about also, how much did you eat? How did you feel when you were done? Did you eat until you felt satisfied? Did you eat until you felt full? Did you eat until there was no more food left on your plate? Did you clear your plate? And how did you feel after you finished eating? How did it feel to have finished that meal? Did you have seconds? So I think this is just a good way to frame the rest of the webinar. And I ask this because, often when I meet with a client for the first time, I'll ask them to take me through what they had to eat the day before, a typical day. And very often people cannot remember what they had for dinner the night before. They have to really think hard about it. So we'll go back to an earlier meal, and then they'll come back and, oh, now I remember. And I think that's a sign when you can't remember your last meal or what you ate even at lunch yesterday. It is a sign that you're not eating mindfully. Okay, next slide. So before we explore mindful eating, let's take a look at mindless eating. And certainly this is something I'm sure we all have done more than once. I'm certainly guilty of it. And mindless eating can occur anytime your brain is distracted and you're not aware of what or how much you're eating. And so there are 5 factors that contribute to mindless eating. Distracted eating is one of them, which we're all familiar with. So mindless eating occurs when your mind is sidetracked by television, an email, a conversation, and other distractions. And it happens when you're multitasking. So here's some examples of that. Chris, if you can just go through. So eating while you're working at your computer. Next. Eating while you're looking at your phone. Next. Eating while you're watching television, for example. Snacking while you're eating. It doesn't have to be a meal. It could be a snack. And the consequence, no, go back, please. The consequence of eating while you're distracted, as you probably have heard, you end up eating faster and often eating more. So a lack of awareness, next slide, is another factor that contributes to mindless eating. It's easy to not realize how much food you're consuming, especially when you eat directly out of the bag or the box and you don't measure portion sizes. Next slide. Disinhibition is another reason for mindless eating, and this simply means eating when you're not hungry. So, for example, like eating from this candy dish just because it's there. Next slide. Or you're searching in your fridge or kitchen cupboards for something to eat when you're not hungry. Maybe you're bored and you're just looking for something to do, and eating would take the place of that. Mindless eating is also eating at random times, rather than proactively planning your meals and your snacks. And there are other factors also that can drive mindless eating. Emotional eating is one of them. Some people turn to food as a source of comfort when they're feeling, down, anxious, stressed, for example. And there are external reasons too, an outside source, whether it's a television commercial or an ad in a magazine for a delicious looking food, can actually prompt you to want to eat and eat. So those are 5 main triggers of mindless eating. Next slide. So the key then is how do we go from mindless eating to mindful eating? Next slide. And let's start, I think before we go to mindless eating, we really need to understand what mindfulness means and what it is. Next slide, Chris, thanks. So the term mindfulness, is, as many of you may know already, was defined by John Kabat-Zinn. He's a professor of medicine at the University of Massachusetts Medical School, where he was the founding executive director of the Center for Mindfulness in Medicine. So he's a scientist, he's a writer, and he's a meditation teacher. And he defined mindfulness as an awareness that emerges through purposely paying attention in the present moment without any judgment. So mindfulness involves then an acceptance, a curiosity, and an awareness of the present moment. And it includes a non-judgmental stance towards all things, no matter how good or how bad. Your mind automatically starts to label something, or a food, for example. Mindfulness, practices, they're not relaxation practices, very different. They really are a form of mental training that can help prevent automatic or reactive thinking. And it's really easy. The things we do in a day, the habits we have, it's easy to be controlled by thoughts that we don't even notice. So practicing mindfulness then helps you become aware of what's going on around us and within us, your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions, even your body sensations. And we'll talk about that more when we get to mindful eating. So mindfulness practices help you become aware of what's going on. And that awareness then that comes from mindfulness allows you to stop living or eating on automatic pilot. Next slide. This slide just shows you, mindfulness practices, in particular, mindfulness meditation has been well studied. And this slide shows some of the benefits that have been found from clinical trials. So mindfulness practices have shown to improve depressive symptoms, anxiety symptoms, reduce stress levels, reduce symptoms of chronic pain, support your immune health. In people who have diabetes, mindfulness as part of a diabetes management program has been shown to help improve diabetes control and even digestion. So those are some of the benefits. All right, so now let's go on to the next slide, mindful eating. What is it? It's not about calories. It's not about an outcome. When we go on, well, not that I like to say these words, but when people put themselves on a diet, it's because they want to achieve an outcome, whether that's weight loss or lowering their cholesterol or their blood pressure. But mindful eating is a tool that absolutely can help you improve eating behaviors. And it's about, as you probably have guessed, paying attention to your food on purpose in the present moment without judgment. And again, without judgment here really means trying to eliminate any guilt around food, your body, and labels of good food, bad food, or any judgment to how a food looks or it tastes, or your memory of how something was when you were a kid. Again, unlike many diets, mindful eating really isn't about rules or losing weight. But that said, weight loss can be a byproduct of mindful eating. So it's about bringing your full awareness to each plate and each bite of food. And you become especially aware of hunger, fullness, and satiety. So definitely mindful eating promotes awareness, which can help people break out of eating habits that may be inconsistent with their goals or their health needs. And once you're aware of what you're doing, how you are eating, you can change behaviors that perhaps have been under the radar for years. Next slide. So again, mindful eating is really about eating with attention and intention. And yes, that involves, as you're going to hear in a minute, eating slowly and without distraction, but it is more than that. So mindful eating really does allow you to become aware of physical and emotional eating cues. It helps you recognize non-hunger eating triggers. It allows you to learn to meet other needs, non-hunger needs, with non-food behaviors. It allows you to choose, really think about the foods that you enjoy, that satisfy you, and that nourish you as well. And as I said earlier, it really does allow you to eat for satisfaction and satiety. Next slide. So here are some of the benefits, what mindful eating can do and how it can help people. So absolutely, it can help reduce overeating. It can help reduce that impulse eating when all of a sudden you have this food craving and that drives you to eat. Or it can reduce eating around external clues like the sight and the smell of food that drive you to eat, or just the fact that food is right there. A lot of research has been done with mindful eating, reducing emotional eating and binge eating. It can help prevent weight gain. It's also been used again like mindfulness meditation in diabetes programs to help control blood sugar. It really can increase the pleasure of eating, which I hinted to earlier. And we're going to talk about something called sensory specific satiety. So if you are increasing the pleasure of eating, you can be satisfied, let's say, by eating a smaller portion of food. Maybe one cookie will do the trick, and it doesn't have to be 4 cookies. We'll talk about that in a minute. And certainly mindful eating practices can help you make better decisions about how much you'll eat, and we'll see that. So I want to take you now just through a few mindful eating exercises. One is called the Raisin Meditation, and I wish I could see you and have a hands up here. But if any of you have taken a course on mindful eating, you've probably done the Raisin Meditation exercise. So this exercise has you eat one single raisin mindfully, and you can do this at home. If you haven't done this before, you can Google it. You'll find a step-by-step outline of exactly what you should be doing. Very easy, but you're eating a single raisin as if you've eaten it for the very first time, as if you were a curious child who's never experienced eating a raisin before. And so it involves noticing at first the appearance, the color, the texture, and the smell of the raisin before putting it in your mouth, and then chewing it while paying attention to how it tastes and feels in your mouth. So you engage all 5 senses, and that is a core component of mindful eating. So basically, you're eating a raisin without impulse, without distraction or judgment. The process doesn't tell you what you should experience. It just really allows you to notice what you are experiencing. I did this exercise actually twice at a course. We used a grape instead of a raisin. And when I ate that grape and I did this exercise, I really noticed things that I had never noticed before when I ate grapes, because I really wasn't fully paying attention. And I think that's what this really will show you. So try this, Google this online, and you'll find an outline how to do it. Next slide. Another mindfulness exercise that, we'll put together with the step-by-step process is using the hunger scale. This is a great thing to do on its own, and I often encourage my clients to do it. So consider the hunger scale, and there are many different ones, but here my hunger scale is number 1 is being the most hungry, and number 8 being the least hungry. So just some things for you to think about right now is, what does it feel like for you when you're a number 1 on the hunger scale? And often people will say headaches, they feel shaky, they may feel irritable, hangry. Think about what a number 8 feels like. It's that kind of feeling bloated, nauseous, swollen even. And think about right now at this point in time, where are you on the hunger scale? And think about what do you notice in your body that makes you give yourself that score on the hunger scale. So I think where this tool is really, really helpful is using this, and practice using it, not at every meal, but maybe a few times a week at a few meals. Rate your hunger level before, halfway through, and then after you're finished eating. And really think about, how do you feel? And what I want you to do is really try to notice how hunger changes as your meal progresses. Another great exercise is to use the scale to check in 1 to 3 hours, let's say after you're finished eating a meal, after you're finished eating dinner, let's say. And if you do that, that can really help prevent you from snacking in the evening when you're not truly physical hungry. And it really allows you also to help distinguish between head hunger, sort of you're thinking about something, you want it, you might see it. Heart hunger, that's your emotional hunger, your emotional eating, and stomach or physical hungry, which is when you should be eating. I have one more exercise before we move on to the 1 to 8 steps. Let's go to the next slide. This is cueing your food memories. And this is interesting. This came from a review of 24 controlled trials that were published in 2013. But basically, the study found that employing 3 strategies while eating can help you eat less during the day. Avoiding distractions, we've talked about. Thinking about your food when eating, so paying attention. But the other point here was remembering what you ate at the previous meal. And in these studies, participants who were instructed to recall the foods they had eaten at lunch ate less in the afternoon. And if a meal was remembered as being satisfying and filling, then calorie intake was reduced later on. So what I'd like you to try is when you sit down to eat, recall your last meal or snack. Recall the foods you ate, their taste, how satisfied you felt after eating. So the theory is here that anything you do to enhance the memory of what you ate, what you eat, can help control how much you eat, not only at that meal, but also later on. And scientists speculate that when we make decisions about eating, we draw on the memories about the satisfying effects of the last meal, which I thought was really interesting. So this is something that you can employ and try as well. All right, next slide. Let's put it all together. So this is just, if you were to sit down and practice mindful eating around a meal, this is what you might do. So first of all, set the stage. You want to be sitting down at a table to eat, not on the couch or in front of the TV. Remove all distractions. And then before eating, take 3 deep breaths to relax and to become really present with the moment. Number 2, you want to start by checking in to see how hungry you feel. So use that hunger scale. And where do you fall on it? And then you would start by serving yourself a very small portion of the food and look at your food. Notice its color, its shape, its smell. So again, we're bringing 5 senses to this meal, or it could be a snack. It doesn't have to be a meal. Consider where the food came from. Consider how nourishing it is. You can also think about these things, because this is part of mindful eating, also when you're cooking and serving your food as well. Next slide. And then really eat slowly and savor your food. And eating slowly is really important. Doing so, as you've probably heard, allows appetite-related hormones to kick in and tell your brain and your stomach that you've had enough to eat. So once you start eating, it takes roughly 20 minutes, you've heard this before, and it is true, for these signals to register. So it really does make sense then, if you're eating quickly, that can cause you to eat too much food before you're even aware of it. Interestingly, previous research has revealed that fast eaters consume more calories at a rate of 3.5 times faster than slow eaters. So those calories can add up. So some of you may have heard of tips to slow down your pace. This is something you have to practice, but pause between your bites. A good exercise to do is after every bite, you put down your knife and your fork. You don't keep that fork in your hand for the whole meal. Chew thoroughly. You might take a sip of water between bites, and don't pick up your utensils again until your mouth is empty. So those are some tips. Next slide. Number 6, halfway through your meal, rate your hunger level again. So think about that scale. Where are you? If you're still hungry, continue eating. If you feel satisfied, if you get to that level 5, is it difficult for you to stop eating? Think about why is that. Give yourself permission to stop, even if there is food left on the plate. That's difficult for some people to do, but give yourself permission. And then think about too, what does it feel like when you stop eating, when you feel satisfied versus full? Is it pleasant? Does it feel unpleasant? So these are all the things you need to be thinking about as you're eating. Number 7 is really focusing on the taste. Is it sweet? Is it salty? Is it sour? Are you actually enjoying the taste? And as I mentioned earlier, can you pick out certain spices or ingredients in the meal? That's how you're paying attention. And the other thing is really is noticing when the flavor and the enjoyment of taste in your meal wanes. This is what I alluded to earlier, sensory specific satiety. And that's a process that happens when your taste buds decrease their sensitivity to taste after a relatively small amount of food. So tuning into the immediate experience of taste and then becoming aware when pleasure or satisfaction from a food decreases, doesn't taste as good as it used to when you first started eating, can really help you learn to get pleasure from smaller portions of food. And you realize that the first few bites of that chocolate cake, wow, did they ever taste delicious? But that delicious taste, yes, it does decrease the more of the cake you eat. So you realize that not only do you need just a few bites or perhaps one cookie to feel satisfied, and you realize that it's not necessary to eat the whole piece or 3 cookies to feel satisfied. And I think really that awareness is powerful, and it can change behavior. Next slide. And number 8, finally, it's really important once you've gone through that meal and you've finished to reflect on it. So think about, wow, okay, I've done this. I've thought about this. What was easy for you about it? What were the most difficult parts? What did you find challenging? And think about how was that different than how you usually approach a meal, how you usually eat. And think about how it might change how you eat at your next meal. One thing, you're not going to master this after doing this once. Really, mindful eating develops over time and with regular practice. This is a mindfulness practice that you need to do regularly. So if you've never done this before or you haven't done it for a while, you might start with 1 meal or 1 snack a week, and then maybe work your way up to a few meals a week, and build up until you're practicing daily. And you don't have to do it at all meals, but I just think it's definitely an awareness and a reminder of what you're experiencing and feeling. Okay, and then next slide here is just a little bit of a recap. So what we've been really talking about here is number 1, you want to recognize your hunger cues and your satiety. You're going to do that by eliminating distractions from meals, eating slowly, and rating your hunger. You're going to engage all of your senses at the beginning of the meal to look, color, shape, smell, and of course, taste. Eating slowly, savoring small bites, eliminating eat and only eat, distractions, choosing your foods wisely so that they're enjoyable to you and nutritious, and really being aware of the conscious of mindless eating, the consequences of mindless eating. Okay, and then I'm just at the end. I know I've taken more of your time. This is just a little pictogram, if you will, of some of the key words we're talking about here: aware, hunger, flavor, taste, distractions, attentiveness, healthy, chewing thoroughly, and so on. But before I take questions, I'm just going to quickly share with you some great resources. The next slide. So these are some of there are lots of them out there, but I wanted to highlight a few. The center, oh, by the way, I'd learned January in 2021 is International Mindless Eating Month. So there you go. Anyway, the Center for Mindful Eating, there's the website there. It's a great website. It's for consumers, the public, as well as professionals. There are free webinars. There are guided mindful eating meditations. I've done a few of them and taken some notes from them. Lots of resources. Mindful-based eating awareness training. There are online programs that you can look at. There's also a program called Craving Change Program, which is cognitive behavioral therapy to overcome emotional eating, a little bit different, but similar. Dr. Daria Rose, she's a neuroscientist and a neuropsychologist, and she offers for free a mindful 5-day meal challenge. You can sign up for it. It starts always on a Monday to Friday, and each day she'll send you an email with a little something to practice, easy, and it builds up. And then if you have apps, the Calm app, the Headspace app, Calm has a series of mindful eating, and so does Headspace. They have a 30-day mindful eating course. So those are some, if you're really interested and want to practice this more, which I really encourage you to do. I think this is a tool to any type of healthy eating program you might be doing, whatever you're doing. Again, just why I think this is so important is because, again, I don't like to use the word diet, but if you're on a diet or a program to lose weight or, to accomplish some kind of outcome, it's hard to maintain those behaviors when the outcome you've achieved it, right? And so, pressures, stresses can get in the way, so the behaviors slip. So I think, being aware all the time and practicing mindful eating can help you can really help you maintain those outcomes by just increasing your awareness and helping to maintain or even implement new behaviors. So with that, I thank you very much for your attention. I know I did take a little bit more time, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Leslie, that was great. Thank you so much. There are numerous questions, so we'll keep going.
Yep.
I think until the question flow slows.
Okay.
The first question is a good one, and it's something I think that a lot of people would feel or were thinking as you were talking, which is, what are your suggestions for eating mindfully in company? So this might be in, families where there are young kids, or maybe it's at dinner,
Right.
When we get to a point where we're going to have a dinner party. Is it possible to eat mindfully at a dinner party and still have conversations?
Yes, absolutely it is. You're certainly not going to go through the full exercise that I just talked about when you're with family or friends and there's conversations going around the table. But I think there are a couple of things that you can do that are important to do. If possible, just kind of, calm the body at the beginning of the meal, a few deep breaths, just try to feel present with the moment. And that's not just it's about paying attention to the company as well, right? But what I would do is, I really think it's a good thing is to practice that hunger scale. That is absolutely something you can do at the beginning of the meal, halfway through, and when you're finished. Rate how you feel, because that's going to determine whether or not, I feel satisfied. I realize, what? I don't need to eat all this food to feel satisfied. So I think that you can still absolutely do.
So someone asked, would it be possible to get a copy of the presentation? So absolutely, we archive these on YouTube.
Yeah.
When we'll send it out to everybody who registered, not just the people who attended, but all of the people who registered will get an email tomorrow with the archive to the YouTube archive of this presentation. So I'm going to skip over a couple because they're not directly related to mindful eating. And then if we have time, we can come back to those. But someone asked, I find I'm mindful all day until the evening snack when I'm always craving salt. Is it possible that my salt intake is too low because I'm on a salt-free diet? And then the corollary to the question is, with the snack, what do you do to counteract that strategy in terms of the evening snack and eating mindfully then?
Yeah, no, that's an excellent question. And if you are eating a low salt diet, I suppose it is possible that you're craving or wanting something salty. That is possible. I don't know for sure that if that's what's happening with you, but that is possible. And I think, the evening snacking for many, I often hear people say, well, I crave something in the evening. And then I dig down a little further with my clients and, do you crave it? Or is it something that you just start thinking about because you're used to doing it? It's become a habit, those under the radar behaviors that we're kind of not paying attention to. And so it's that time, you kind of feel like it. You might be watching TV, you start thinking about it. You might know that there's potato chips in the cupboard. So then that's a magnet as well. And eventually you kind of give in and, this habit continues. So I think before reaching something automatically, so again, that's the mindless thing, right? Giving into comfort or because it's there. Before reaching for something automatically, really stop and take a moment. And this takes practice. It's not easy. You got to kind of step back, be present, and take notice of what you're feeling and what you might want to fill you up. And think about how you're feeling. Are you stomach hungry? Why do you want something to eat? Are you stressed? Are you bored? Are you sad? And are you actually physically hungry? And if you are, fine, have something and think about what it is that you would want. But if you're not, then, this is where some people make a list of alternate behaviors, something else that will help me more so than eating something when I'm not truly hungry. But I think that my point here, it's really important to take a moment, think about this so that you can, really be mindful of your reactivity and make a choice or make a decision as opposed to just autopilot. And so it's hard, but it just takes practice. And once you stop and you think about it, the more often you do it, the easier it is. And you're more likely to, if it's not something you really physically need, then you're more likely to break that pattern.
Great answer. So for people who live alone or who like to eat alone, and a lot of them eat in front of the TV, on maybe a TV table. What do you say to these people? Can you do both, or
You can't do
what's
both.
the advice there?
If you're eating while you're watching TV, you are distracted and you will very likely eat more. You're not paying attention to the fact you're eating. You know, we have, all of us have done this, right? You're doing something else while you're eating and all of a sudden you look down, oh, where did that go? I didn't even realize I finished that. So, and don't forget, there's that 20-minute window too, before your brain and your stomach catches up with, feeling satiated. So, I think I would really, really try to break that habit. The TV is going to be there after dinner. The TV is going to be there on the weekend. I would really try to make your meal so that you're really paying attention to it. Set the table, sometime, if it's Saturday night, put a candle on the table, all those nice things that are enjoyable, and then really pay attention to the fact you're eating. That's mindful eating, not eating in front of the television. So I think it's a great, it would be really, I think a really great goal is to try to, move your meals to a table as opposed to in front of the television. And it becomes a habit and a routine.
Here's another one. When I stop eating dinner, when I'm at level 5, I find I have trouble sleeping. I wake up during the night. Any suggestions?
Well, then that means, and I'm assuming that means that you wake up in the middle of the night feeling hungry, that you've got growling stomach, empty stomach. So no, that's not a good thing, because you don't want to interrupt your sleep by waking up hungry. So I suppose then, I guess you could do a couple of things. You could, you could think about the portions that you're eating at your meal, and maybe you could have a little, well, first of all, the composition of your meal may matter, depending on the amount of protein on your plate versus carbohydrates. Maybe you need to shift the composition so that the food, healthy fats and protein take longer to empty from your stomach, so they keep you feeling satisfied longer. That could be it. And maybe you do need to eat a little bit more at your meal. It doesn't mean you're going to get past level 5 feeling satisfied. Maybe a little bit past, that's fine. Or maybe you realize that you just need a little something, an hour before going to bed, small handful of nuts or something to prevent that. You'll have to figure what that is. But I think the most important thing is whatever is right for you. You've become aware. You learn where the right spot is for you to finish eating. You're not super full. You're not stuffed. It might be a number 6. And that's your experience and your awareness. It makes you feel good for the rest of the evening. You can sleep the night through. So it's different for everybody. And I'm not saying a 5 is just, where you have to be, but I think listen to your body. And I think that's what mindful eating is all about. Listening to your own hunger and satiety cues.
Here's a non-mindful eating question that is nevertheless interesting. Is it better to eat 3 meals a day or 5 smaller meals per day? And that'll be the last question, and then we'll shift into the wrap up.
Sure. You know what? I don't think there's a right or wrong answer to that. It depends on who you are. It depends on your health. For example, your blood sugar control. You probably wouldn't want to eat 5 or 6 times a day, but it really depends on what your lifestyle, what's easy for you to do. And I think, this goes, the 5 or 6 times a day goes back to, I remember years ago, there were studies on grazing. So eating 5 or 6 identically small sized meals throughout the day. These researchers showed that these people had better cholesterol, blood sugar, et cetera. But how practical is that for someone? If you can equally divide up your meals, fine. Some people who start early in the morning and they have breakfast, let's say 6:30, and lunches at noon, there absolutely should be including a snack mid-morning to just help bridge the gap and keep them going, keep their blood sugar stable throughout the day, prevent being too hungry at lunch, and the same thing between lunch and dinner. So it depends on your schedule, who you are. It can be different from one is not inherently better than the other.
Decide what's best for you. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, the wrap up. So our next webinar is about, I'm really looking forward to this one. It's about walking through a typical day. We're all working in such strange situations. So people are working on their beds. Most people are working from home on, say, a bar stool at a kitchen counter, or in an office. Maybe you have a great chair. But the point is to walk through a work day and go through and say, when do you stretch? When do you need to stretch? What is a healthy back day look like in order to reduce, sore neck, upper back, from these strange situations in which many of us are finding ourselves work. The person who is hosting the next webinar is Marlo Goldstein. She's wonderful. She works in the sports rehabilitation and therapy section of Medcan. And she's going to be doing the stretches alongside us. So that's wonderful. Look for that in your next Medcan newsletter. Also upcoming, we're doing a series about how to change on the Eat, Move, Think podcast. The next one is from Dr. Ryan Rhodes, and it's about bridging the intention behavior gap. And so it's about going from a desire to change to actually executing the change. He's the national expert in bridging the intention behavior gap. And look for that. That'll be coming out on Eat, Move, Think podcast, available on all the platforms. And that comes out on Monday. Okay, thanks very much. Leslie, thank you so much. Any final wrap-ups?
No, I just want to thank everyone for being here and really appreciate it. And all the best. Happy New Year to everybody, and happy, healthy, and safe.